Welcome to One Man's Tracks, the secondhand music channel. Thanks to my obsession with just kind of grabbing anything that looks interesting and unique off of the thrift shop shelves, I've stumbled across an obscure and experimental noise rock group that operated out of Portland, Oregon in the early 2000s. They were known as Point Line Plain. This flash-in-the-pan synth-punk project started out as a duo back in 2001, consisting of singer and keyboardist Joshua Blanchard and Nathan Carson on percussion and moog. They'd bring their wild, loud, no-wavy dance punk on the road, performing over 100 shows during their first couple of years together before releasing a split EP with the Planet The through Mountastic Records that I can't seem to find anywhere. Following it up with their self-titled debut in 2003, a boisterous, tumultuous spattering of in-your-face, fuzzy wails on top of squealing synths and smashing drums. It can be a bit jarring overall, but it does occasionally fall into these danceable industrial grooves that are well punctuated by Josh's poignantly shrieked repetitive lyricism. I'll point you towards a few tracks from that album I think are worth your while. Open Your Mind Light, Code Decode, and 8-Bit Graveyard, and I actually found this album on the internet, so I'll link it down in the description for you. Later on in '03, after releasing another couple of songs through an evasive 7-inch, they'd add a third member to the group, Howard Gillum, aka Super Sprite, and he'd bring even more synths and sound effects to further fill out this band's eclectic mix. They'd hop into the studio in the spring of '04 and start recording and producing the band's second and final album. Through Skin Graft Records, released on October 4th, 2004. Here's Point Line Plain's Smoke Signals. The addition of Gillum here seems to enable a little bit more of a cohesive sonic atmosphere that allows the group to slow down a little bit and better emphasize their points and lines to generate more intricate planes. This record, being all about communication breakdowns, comes across quite a bit more clearly than their previous release, as messy and chaotic as it can be. It's a structure that certainly makes for more accessible tunes, bridging the gaps between no-wave, prog rock, dance punk, and noise with this softer, almost muted throwback production style that creates this oddly disconnected, unconventional listening experience that I find quite unique. A rather difficult post-rock distillation that I find grows on me the more I listen to it, and flows surprisingly well across its 32-minute runtime, but it does have a few tracks I find hit or miss, and maybe overall a little bit too much compression for the sake of cohesive comprehension. I feel like we miss out on some of those more abrasive expressions for a hazier and more balanced ambiance. Still, Smoke Signals manages to entertain a solid range of dispirited synthy sounds, disconnected grooves, temperamental tempo shifts, and spirited droning that does so well to creatively convey this album's themes and messages. And it starts us right out with the tense title track. It's the steadily pulsating, void-shouting synth rock introduction. Smoke Signals, a song whose intense, shaky builds and crazed delivery leaves me teetering on the edge between reality and an uncanny parallel dimension. A rowdy post-punk epic with this compelling, contradictory chorus that sets us up on an anxious edge. Feels so different, feels so different, feels the same. Feels so different, feels so different, feels the same. Further adding to that disorienting anxiety with Adult Contempt, a rather groovy, up-tempo piece of gothic dance punk that confronts aging and self-discipline through these cryptic associations, and all told by this very unsympathetic narrator. Then on to the deep and despondent BUGS, whose melody sounds ripped right out of an old arcade game, kind of Castlevania-esque. It gives this song's melodrama and lyrics a bit of a creepy, childish vibe, being both playful and sinister all at once, and then really not giving us much of a satisfying conclusion. This is just an unsettling art rock number. I'm pretty glad they didn't keep drawing out. I could definitely do with more of that anti-technology sentiment on Descender, though, with its great driven and synergetic performances. It makes for such a tight and catchy, dark and paranoid track. I think is an absolute banger. One of the best these guys ever did. Transitioning through a short, spacey interlude titled Lights Out 1, we make our way to the floaty, retrogressive synth sounds of 1976. Droning along this atmospheric timeline accompanied by a vocoder that depressingly transmits the feelings of the past, the present, and the future. I am a little on the fence about this one. On one hand, I do like that throwback style, but on the other, especially given the context of the rest of the record, this track does feel a little too one-dimensional and maybe even a bit too sedate. I do, however, get quickly caught up in the incomprehensible rage of the explosive, grandiose, noisy rocker DRUG with its incessant ambient buzzing, its smashing breakdowns and rolling verses. It's just a lovely headbanging mess. Ending with The Messenger, a track that's seemingly about how distance affects communication, that point being emphasized by the vocal track that slowly drifts off as this song progresses and leaves us in this strange, blissful state of cacophonous forgetfulness. It's an interesting place to end, and it leaves us droning out with another short little interlude. This time it's Lights Out 2 that finishes the record off, evaporating in the warmth of synthy sunshine. A record that feels fluid yet disconnected. It feels sharp but uncertain. Filtering through the haze of smoke signals isn't an exact science. It's an emotional mixed bag of uneasy, experimental, progressive electro rock whose intentional messiness leads to some really interesting and even innovative cuts that stand out in their own eccentric ways. The strained howls and thunderous drums certainly won't be for everyone, but if you're in the market for some rambunctious, rolling and rumbling, disdainful post-rock with the occasional snappy line in it, Point Line Plain sent out this rather unusual smoke signal in your direction nearly 20 years ago. I love finding these strange and somewhat forgotten bands. Did any of you guys ever listen to Point Line while they were still around? I'm pretty sure Nathan Carson still plays with the doom metal band Witch Mountain, but I haven't heard anything about the other two since this. Is there any other noise rock group that this reminds you of? I'm always looking for recommendations down in the comments. Here's a couple of other I think you might enjoy, and if you made it this far in the video, please consider leaving a like and think about subscribing if you haven't for more throwback, secondhand music retrospectives. Thank you so much for being here. Take good care. Rock on, guys. They say the progress brought me down. They say the